Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Gland Bodybuilding Mountain. And today I'm going to be doing some squats. The last leg workout, which was a couple days ago, I did walking lunges. And I showed you some squats a few vlogs ago where I did some squats and then I went into the Sissy squat or the hybrid Sissy squat or partial Sissy squat, whatever you want to call it. And then I did some Romanian deadlifts. But today my goal is to go a bit heavier on squat. We'll see if my body feels like it or not, because you know what, you never know until you do a few sets, right? So I've already accomplished a couple sets of warm-ups, and then I'm going to do another set of 225. I already did one set of 225. I'll do another set, then I'll move into 315, and then we'll see where I go from there. Because that's the way it has to be. When you're training, you have to, have an idea, like a goal, but at the same time, be collaborating with the sensations of the body and see if the body's saying, hey, that goal is okay to pursue today or not. And that's something in my youth I did not do enough. I would say I have a goal, and if I die in the process, that's okay, as long as I accomplish the goal. And I realized that there are far worse things than death, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes, it sounds all great, to just pursue a goal and to be so alpha, and then, you're wheeling around in a chair for the next few weeks and you're like, oh, well, maybe there would have been a smarter way of strategically attacking the body. And so this is the thing. So the reason why I do squats too is not because they're the most effective leg exercise, although I would say they're up there, but also because it is my chosen form of systemic stimulation. So what that means is that I notice that my entire body gets stimulated anabolically from putting weight on my back. And I notice Romanian deadlifts and bent over rows are still pretty good, but for some reason squats, because they involve the hips so much and the main muscle groups in the legs and so forth, I feel that I have a much larger amount of bodily stimulation from them. So you may have a different lift. It might be deadlifts for you. It might be rack deads, like partial rack deads, like whatever it is. But you're going to find that there's going to be some sort of systemic stimulating movement. So this is a must for natural bodybuilders. It's to stimulate the entire system as well as stimulate the individual muscles. And the reason why it's so important to stimulate the whole system is because that's going to stimulate the endocrine system and the immune system and all of these different systems that get online in order to say, hey, alert, alert, we need to get bigger, stronger as a whole. Like the entire body needs to start listening, right? Not just an individual muscle group like biceps or something. So this is the other form of synergy that I apply in my training, where I stimulate the system and then I stimulate the individual muscle groups, and I use multiple rep ranges to do this. So that said, with squats, I don't have to do 5 rep sets in order to stimulate my system, right? Even if I'm doing sets of 10 to 15 or 20 reps, I still feel that the squat does its job. You might feel differently, but that's what I found for myself. And again, squats are one of those movements that it's great to go heavy in squats, but they also can be dangerous if done at the wrong time. Say you feel a little bit tight in the lower back or the hamstrings or something just feels a bit off. I wouldn't recommend going heavy on those days if that's what's happening. But sometimes it's not necessary, and that's the neat part about it. So yeah, this is my favorite leg exercise and body exercise as a whole, but walking lunges are probably more effective for building quad growth for me, right? And at the same time, I love doing step-ups and one-legged squats, different variations. And I do like leg presses too. Leg presses are great for just stimulating certain parts of the leg. But again, as a systemic sort of stimulation, I don't find leg presses give me the same bang for the buck as squats, of course, right? Because you're not putting that stress on the spine or on all the upper back muscles and so forth. It's more isolated. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Let's do another warm-up set at 225, and then we'll see how this goes. So yeah, now I got 365 on the bar. I did multiple sets of 315, just warm-ups, like sets of 10 to 15 reps, right? Just going through the motions, making sure everything feels good. And then I'll do this and then see what happens, right? I'll just see how this feels, and then I make decisions on a case-per-case basis. I don't just, say, okay, I did a good warm-up and then bang, right into the heavy weight, right? So, you have to go with your own intuition on this, and you have to go with your own experience in the body. But another reason why I did so many warm-ups too is that somebody called me in between sets, and I just answered the call, and I had them on speaker the whole time, and I was just doing warm-up sets to maintain the warmth of the body and to make sure that I'm continuing to keep that warmth, right? Because one mistake some people make is that they'll warm up and then maybe something happens, they lock their keys in their car or something like that, and then they come back and then they forget that they have to re-warm up again and to make sure that the body's calibrated before they move into that heavy weight. So if you do get distracted, say you're training at home, because it's pretty common, and then you come back into the workout, remember you have to warm up again. You can't just go back into the heavy weight, because that can be dangerous, because once you let yourself get cold, then things tighten up a little bit. And then the thing is about squats is that you want everything perfectly calibrated, right? And one small shift in a muscle group, one change in temperature can mean an injury sometimes. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So the longest I would rest in between sets, if I was doing squats, is 5 to 7 minutes. That's the longest that I would do it, because any longer than that, I think that you're tempting fate when it comes down to cooling down, right? Usually my rest between sets when I'm doing legs is around 3 or 4 minutes between sets. And sometimes it is, if I'm in really good shape, then sometimes it's only 2 minutes or so, 2.5 minutes. But yeah, 3 to 4 minutes is usually average for me between sets of squats or lunges and so forth. The important thing is to get your breath back to normal after you do your set. And once your breath is back to normal, then fatigue and exhaustion is going to be dissipated, and therefore you can make sure that you're maintaining the proper form as you're lifting, because that's the most important thing. So if you're too exhausted to maintain proper form, then that could be, again, another injury risk, right? So you want to make sure that you're always rested enough to make sure you have proper form with the lower back, and then you can go further. Now, if you're doing something easy, like leg extensions or even leg presses or leg curls, form is not quite as important at that point. It's not quite as much a weak link. So because of this, because the injury risk is not as high, you can do less rest in between sets and not worry about sloppy form causing an injury, or at least subtle lapses in your form causing an injury, right? So that's the thing. So if you're looking at increasing your intensity through really short amounts of rest, then I would say stick to a machine or something that's a little bit more stabilized, where you're not using as much lower back, and that would be a safer way to do that if you're leg training. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. So yeah, let's do a set of 365 and then see what goes on from there. Once again, even these pants are just like getting eaten by my ass every time. So that's the biggest risk in training is your ass eating your pants. Pretty good, felt pretty stable. And let's stretch the quads out a little bit here. That feels good too, yeah. Yeah, sometimes the squat just feels good, right? Once you're locked into the groove. And again, you guys know the way I squat is I do the constant tension thing, and I feel where I'm feeling the stress in the bellies. Once it starts to transfer to the joints, it means I've gone too far down or something. But you're gonna have to find your own sweet spot. Like, don't try to do exactly what I do, because the way you move is going to be dictated by how you're built. So you might be more a straight up and down squatter and so forth, and that's going to majorly change the range of motion that's necessary in order for you to hit those muscle bellies. So make sure you take that into account. You're not me, you know what I mean? You're most likely better than me, but we're not here to be better than each other, you know what I mean? We're here just to find out what works, and that's it, and just play around the gym. So it's amazing, like once you find that right groove, you get like all this tension in the ass and the bellies of the legs and stuff. And it just feels good. It gives you that sense of well-being. And one thing I think is underestimated by most of the people teaching any sort of exercise is teaching people how to connect to that well-being in the set. You know, teaching them how to connect to the muscle tension and to notice when the tension is staying in the muscle and then when it's also transferring in a destructive way to the joints, right? Because, you know, I always get this thing when people say, hey, you should train your joints too. And I've always said, you already train your joints. Your joints are already getting trained in any exercise that you're doing. But are you going to try to exploit the joints and make them explode in the process, right? That's obviously not a positive thing. So joint pain can't be the dominating factor in your workouts. If it is, then that means you're training wrong for you, or you may need some sort of other type of auxiliary type of training, some flexibility training, some massage therapy, you name it, right? There could be a lot of different factors going on, but one thing is for sure, training in a way that's making your joints feel like they're going to explode is not going to help your long-term progress in this game. So I love the fact that when you connect to your own body, you start to be able to feel directly in the moment what is the appropriate way to lift. The body's telling you right away. You're experiencing it right in that moment. You don't need to consult any Google. You don't need to go to YouTube. You don't need to listen to an asshole on the internet like me, right? You can just, in the moment, find out exactly where's that force playing out and then follow that. So as I'm doing my exercise, as I'm doing the squats, I'm keeping the back slightly arched, and I'm following where I'm feeling that stress. And then once I go past a certain point, there's almost like a break or a threshold where I feel the stress then starts to go boom, transfer to another area. And what I do is I come down to where I feel that's about to happen, and then I go back up again. So this is like magic, I'm telling you. It's like, sometimes I wish I was 25 again and I could make different decisions about playing hockey and shit, because there's so much that I know now that would have related to even better results than I have right now, because I wouldn't have made a few different mistakes along the way, especially with the sports that I did outside the gym, you know, because that's where, you know, I got tortured a bit, right? But that's the thing. Bodily wisdom is what you're here for, and know that every single time you're doing a set, you're training your bodily wisdom. And another example of this is yesterday I was doing some flat dumbbell presses, and in the moment my shoulders were tight, and I was like, why are my shoulders tight? Like, it wasn't a bad pain. It was just a bit of tightness in the shoulders, like they were fatigued somehow. And I had forgotten that the day before I did front raises, superset it with lateral raises, and then I went into shoulder presses. So my front delts were fatigued and exhausted from the day before. But you see, my body knew this, even though my intellect had forgotten. So as I was on the bench, I realized, okay, my body's telling me something. That means I might need a few more warm-ups before I get into my work weight on the flat dumbbell presses. And my body was telling me this, and by listening to the body and trusting that I would know the reason later, I had a great workout. So this is why what the body's telling you has to take first priority. Secondarily, let your intellect tell you what's going on, because the body knows way ahead of time before the intellect even understands. So it's a very instinctual training. It's the real instinctual training, not this other one that says, hey, I just feel like training arms today instead of chest or something. I'm teaching you the real instinctual training right now. That's what it's all about. Okay, let's do another set. What do you think, 365 again? I'll do another set of 365, and then we'll see. Maybe I'll move up or maybe I'll stay the same. We'll see. Felt pretty good, yeah. Now that felt good. Now if, you know, some of you guys might be thinking like, hey, you know, 365, if you're pyramiding up in weight, then you know, you should go 365, don't waste any energy, then go right up into 4 plates or 4.5 or whatever it is you want to do. But for me, again, this is a lesson that I learned the hard way, is that if sometimes I feel like my body still needs a little bit more adjustment to that heavier weight, I'm better off staying for another set and then moving into heavier after that. Because I'm not worried about having the perfect set. What I'm worried about is making sure my body's in one piece. That's the most important thing. So yeah, sometimes you'll see me, even though it might be classified as a waste of energy, you'll sometimes see me do an extra warm-up set and then move into my pinnacle set or whatever. Now, I haven't squatted 4 plates for a while. I've been doing more 3 plates and 3.5 plates, even mostly 3 plates. Like the last squat workout I did was 365, and I haven't really done 4 plates. I haven't felt the need to. I've just been doing more walking lunge type movements and stuff. So yeah, sometimes when I start to get back into heavier weight a bit again, I'm a little bit careful at first, and then just to feel myself through the groove as it goes up. Because the other thing people don't take into account with squats, and this might be a lot different than say with something like bench presses and stuff, is that your groove totally changes as you go up in heavier weight, okay? And the reason why is because there's the counterbalancing effect, right? Where you're trying to stay on your feet, and obviously if you squat the exact same way with heavier or lighter weight, you might be bending forward or you might be coming back, right? You might not stay on your feet. And with bench press though, or like say bent over rows and stuff, it's not quite the same sort of thing going on. You're not trying to keep your feet at the same time. It's basically just small, minute adjustments are necessary. But with the squat, it's quite major because there's 2 different joints involved. And you know, like say squat up and down like this, you'll fall backwards, right? If I put more weight, it's just physics. Then you don't have to bend over as much. Then you're more straight up and down as you have more weight, right? Right? So you got to take this stuff into account too. So your groove does change a little bit. So the other thing you want to do is that the first rep or 2 with heavier weight when you're squatting is to perform it slowly and allow yourself to acclimate to that new groove and that new center of gravity. And then from there, you can start to pump the reps out at a faster rate. So that's a pro tip there, you know? So that pro tip came straight from my ass, just so you know, just straight from my ass. That's for you. Yeah, okay, let's go. So 4 plates should feel pretty light, but we'll see what happens. So let's give myself a little twist here. Okay. All right, let's go. Are you guys cheering me on? It's a lot easier for me to do the set if you cheer me on, so make lots of noise in the background there. I need that positive reinforcement, you know? Yeah. That felt perfectly stable, really good, and I'm gonna leave it at that, right? So that's my squat workout for now. Now I'm gonna move into some rehab work. Whew. Now, a thing that you guys might wanna consider as well is that when I'm doing heavy squats like this, I found that there's a happy medium between using heavy weight and using too much weight, right? Because I used to think heavier is always better. But you'll find that there's that perfect sweet spot where there's some strength involved, there's a lot of power involved, but at the same time, you're not getting the joint pain or the joint integrity becoming more the weak link, right? And I think you guys have all found this. It's like there's a certain weight threshold that once you go beyond, you know, depending on what strength you're at. So there's a certain weight threshold that you'll find that when you go past that, it causes a lot more destruction and pressure in the joints as opposed to giving you more muscular gains. Now, I'm not saying that this threshold doesn't move. As you get stronger, that threshold will move. But if you step over that threshold too often, all you do is get joint irritation. And this happened to me back when I was like 19, 20 years old. And I noticed that when I was bench pressing with 275 or 295, I was good. But if I bench press with 315 for sets of 3 or 4 reps, just for the sake of getting in heavy weight, if I did that too often, what would happen is I just get shoulder issues, or I'd start to get weaker or feel burnt out, or I just wouldn't recover, right? And so it almost like, I guess you could put it this way. It's almost like there's a certain weight that just causes trauma to the body, and then there's a weight that causes stimulation. And making a very sober decision about where this line is, and of course you push the envelope from time to time, but you don't want to step over it too often, right? You don't want to step into the traumatic weight territory too often, because then you just get injured, or you just go backwards in your training, or you just cause yourself more complications. So for myself, 3.5 plates to 4 plates is great. It feels great right now. And I did 4.5 plates just, I think it was about a year ago, I was doing that. But I find that if I start getting the 5 plates, 5.5 plates area for squats, I start to get into a little bit more of a danger territory, and the risk versus reward is not necessarily worth it for me at this point. Now, if I can start easily doing 5 plates for sets of 20, 25 reps, then that might be a different discussion. But I'd rather stay with a weight, especially with squats, that I can do well over 10 reps. And usually I don't move up in weight until I can get, 20 to 25 reps with a given weight. If I really push to close to failure, so say if I'm doing 4 plates for sets of 20, then I feel comfortable going to 4.5 plates and doing some sets there. So it's something that you have to negotiate for yourself, because each person's also going to have a different weight tolerance and different specific issues going on. But for myself though, I find that you're better off choosing that weight where it's comfortable, like comfortably challenging, but not so much so that it's a challenge to the joint integrity itself. Because once you get into that territory, sometimes when the joints snap, that's it, they snap, right? You don't want to go beyond that. That can be career ending. So that's why you see me do this. So I'd rather have a perfect groove and really stimulate that muscle, just like you see a lot of pros, right? They'll find that perfect weight, and when they lift that weight, they can lift a lot more, but they're finding that perfect sweet spot between lifting heavy and also lifting safely. And I think that's something that you can gain a lot of benefit in embracing. So yeah, just remember that. Heavy's good, but too heavy, bad. I could have said it like that. That probably would have been a simpler speech, right? I should have started with that. Heavy good, too heavy bad. So yeah, so what I'm gonna do now is a bit of a sissy squat sort of thing. Some of you guys remember this from a few videos ago. And what I'm doing is just rehabilitating those knees, bringing the knees over the toes, with the feet flat on the ground, the heels flat on the ground, and then I lift the heel off just a little bit at the end, just to get that little bit of extra in there. And that basically helps get a really good burn in the medialis, but I'm not going so far in this that I'm feeling any sort of grating or extreme pressure in the knees, because you can overdo range of motion too, right? So my goal is to isolate and to stimulate and to rehabilitate, but not to break. Pretty simple. So yeah, here we go. Let's do a set. Now, another thing that I found myself doing when it comes down to deciding how many sets to perform is I do go by the fatigue meter, right? There's a meter of some sort, kind of like the Ghostbusters. They have those PKE ghost reading type things, imagine if I had a fatigue meter, right? But I feel like when I'm doing major movements such as squats or bent over rows, you may notice that I don't do quite as many sets, because part of me is experiencing the metabolic fatigue involved in using those bigger muscle groups. And because I'm using so many different muscle groups all together, I feel like there's, let's just say not as much volume needed to stimulate. Now, I'm not saying you have to go to an extreme with this, because you've seen me do, if you've been here for a while, you've seen me do a lot of sets, sometimes like 7, 8 sets, 10 sets. Sometimes that's necessary. I'm not saying it isn't, but I like to reset back into the intense approach with a lower amount of volume. Now, what's low volume for a compound such as squats will be different than what I classify as low volume when it comes down to skull crushers or tricep press downs or lateral raises, right? Because they're not so metabolically fatiguing. You may find that you can do more sets with those. One could argue maybe you don't need to, but one thing I have found is that sometimes a few extra sets to those smaller body parts adds a little bit of growth, right? So if I do like 6 or 7 sets for shoulders, say I'm doing 3 sets of lateral raises and 3 sets of bent over lateral raises, that is giving me a little bit more growth than saying just the 2 or 3 sets, right? But with squats and big leg movements, I find that my overall system gets destroyed after 3 or 4 sets, especially if I'm taking those sets close to failure. And I don't necessarily need to keep destroying that same pathway in order to get the results, right? It seems like there's a message or a signal sent to my body that seems to be sufficient. Yeah, so anyway, if you're wondering why sometimes you see me do different amounts of sets for different things, that's probably why. And also, of course, there could be some laziness in there. You know, you guys can argue that. That's fine. You can call me lazy. That's fine. But yeah, like I said, my legs are growing. I can feel them growing again from doing this nice combination of walking lunges and some Romanian deadlifts, and then going into the heavy squats, alternating. You know, so I'm doing a 2-day split right now. So half the body one day, half the body another day. But the other thing is, though, I'm not always going to do just walking lunges. Sometimes I will do the one-legged squats with the barbell or one-legged squats with the dumbbells, alternating back and forth, you know, like this. You know, so it's good to vary up things, change things up, because like I said, you always make new discoveries as you change pathways from time to time. And sometimes you just get those exciting results that you didn't expect. And that's kind of fun. It's almost like opening up Christmas presents, right? It's like the bodybuilder Santa Claus comes and drops gifts under the squat rack. So, you know, if you want the bodybuilder Santa Claus to come to your house this year, I highly recommend that you send the letters to naturalgalantbodybuilding.com attached to a check for $495,000.995. That would be good. Santa Claus, he'll probably show up. He might. I am wearing the red pants today, so you never know. It could happen. So yeah, on that note, let me do another set of rehabilitation for the knees here, and then we'll see what I'm going to talk about next. I don't know what I'm going to talk about next. I have no idea. Now, another thing I think is worth talking about is the splitting the body up into 2 different workout sessions in a day. Now, I'm not saying you have to do this for results, but the times that you might want to consider it is, say, for instance, you do a really hard leg workout, and then you notice that after you do, like say your quads, right, you're doing squats and you're doing some isolation movement and so forth, that you're metabolically just exhausted, right? And maybe your workout schedule says that you should also do hamstrings or maybe some upper body movements or something like that. I think there can be, if you have the time, you know, not everybody has the time, but if you have the time, there can be some benefit to going home, refeeding, you know, eating a good couple meals, taking a nap or whatever, and then coming back to train the other body parts fresh. And therefore, you're ensuring that, let's just say your exhaustion isn't influencing your ability to take those muscles into a deeper level of failure. And that could be something worthwhile investigating. So again, I understand that a lot of people don't have the time, and I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm just saying if you're noticing that you want to build some enthusiasm around your training and you have the time, this could be a way to attacking body parts from a different angle. And you might want to just do it short term, like just for a week or two or a few days, or just try a workout or two where you split it up into 2 different sessions and then go back to your normal routine again. But doing this once in a while might produce interesting fruit. That's all I can say. A lot of the pro bodybuilders do this sort of thing because they're also interested in raising the metabolism, because once they train, the metabolism is raised up for several hours after they train, if not 24 to 48 hours from weight training. But they get that extra calorie burning approach, and they can get some extra volume in from doing these 2 different sessions. Of course, you're going to have a burnout threshold in this as well, but once in a while pushing that threshold is a good idea. That's all I'm saying. Sometimes you want to push the limits in the body. Sometimes you want to push extra sets or push extra frequency or push more failure just for short periods of time, and then maybe go back to the normal way that you train. And sometimes just by doing these mild pushes, you can break through some plateaus or start to get some results in interesting ways, right? You can start to get some unexpected gains from that. So yeah, it's often overlooked because people are so afraid of overtraining, and I don't blame them, but sometimes pushing that extra mile, sometimes pushing extra hard for short periods of time can produce good fruit. You know what I'm saying? It can produce some good gains. So don't be afraid of that.
Mountain.
All right, I'm gonna do a couple sets of Romanians, and then I think I'll go get a cookie or something. Because I deserve a cookie. If you train hard, you deserve a cookie. That's just the way it is. And yes, my intellect is going down steadily, so I know I had a good workout. So. So the nice part about doing one compound lift pretty heavy so that you stimulate that overall systemic growth is that then when you do the other movements, you can rep out, go deeply into that burn, and you get that benefit because you're already getting that system stimulation. And then when I rep out with these Romanian deadlifts for sets of 20, 30, 40 reps, you know, maybe 4,007 reps. Because did you guys count? I think I probably got about 4,000 reps. Was it 5,000? You know, it's so hard, right? Because it's like it's so light for me. I can't count. So anyway, what I'm saying is that you don't have to lift heavy every single set, every single time in order to get the benefit of lifting heavy. And this is the great thing about it. So when you lift super heavy, it's great. But if you lift heavy too often, you break down the tissue and break down the joints and stuff. So you can lift for 1 or 2 lifts heavy, and then these finisher lifts you can rep out. And especially these things like Romanian deadlifts, I'm getting some decent weight here. I mean, it might not be decent weight for you guys, but it's decent weight for me, and I'm getting a good stretch of the hamstrings. And because it's a good stretchy type movement, I'm also stimulating those hamstrings in a really aggressive way. Also, I'm rehabilitating them in case that they're out of alignment or they're too tight, you know. Now I'm stretching them. And when you stretch the hamstrings under tension, the beautiful thing is that it now allows you to use the hamstrings more safely during squats or other compound lifts, right? Because when you can keep the back arched along with contracting the hamstrings are here, contracting the hamstrings and stretching the hamstrings, and you can still keep your back in the right position, that provides a perfect balance between the hamstring's ability to be strong and flexible at the same time and allow you to maintain proper lower back form. So yeah, I got the benefit of the stretch, great stimulation from this movement, but it's also the squat that led me to be able to get a greater workout stimulation from all the things that I'm doing. So yeah, synergy, it's a thing, look it up. Synergy, SYNERGY, SENDMONEY to naturalglandbodybuilding.com, $495,000. You see how I did that? Mountain. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this workout. I sure did. Santa Claus is gonna be leaving a lot of presents under the squat rack for me tonight, guaranteed. And yeah, if you need to get hold of me, just go to naturalglandbodybuilding.com. And thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now.